me a tripping hazard.
Oh, huge, yeah.
Good afternoon, committee. We are just going live right now.
Okay, thanks, Ryan.
Which is Ryan's way of saying shush.
Thank you very much, Mr. Westerson. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Governance Standing Policy Committee for Thursday, March 25th, 2021. I think that's where we are currently at. I'll start with the reconciliation statement. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we're gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains, and we pay respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationships to the land. The City of Lethbridge is also located within Region 3 of the Métis Nation of Alberta. Mr. Westerson, could I have you do a roll call, please?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Councillor Morrow.
Yeah.
Councillor Crowson.
Here.
Councillor Carlson.
Present.
Councillor Kaufman.
Present.
A link is just being provided to Councillor Parker as well, and he will be logging on momentarily. And in the chamber is myself and Ms. Crisanti, and we do have a member of the public here to observe.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, and welcome everybody this afternoon to the meeting. Adoption of the agenda. Do we have any additions to the agenda, Mr. Westerson?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion then from Councillor Morrow. Be it resolved that the agenda of the Governance Standing Policy Committee of Thursday, March 25th, 2021 be adopted, including all communications as submitted by the clerk. Councillor Morrow?
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor? Hearing no opposed, that's carried. Move on to the consent agenda. We have two items in the consent agenda, the minutes as well as the governance SPC status of initiatives. Any questions around either of those? Okay, hearing none. Got a motion from Councillor Crowson. Be it resolved that the minutes of the February 25th, 2021 Governance Standing Policy Committee meeting be approved, and that the chair and clerk designate be authorized to sign the same, and further be it resolved that the Governance Standing Policy Committee receive the March 25th, 2021 status of initiatives as information. Councillor Crowson.
Question.
Question has been called. All those in favor? Sorry, hearing anybody opposed? We'll do it that way. Hearing no opposition, that's carried. 4.1, KPMG Human Resource Recommendation number 2. Mr. Elliott, I believe you were going to walk us through this.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Kaufman. Thank you to the committee, and with me today I have Dean Okawa. Dean is our benefits manager, so if we get too deep into the weeds, he'll be able to pull us out and help us understand some of the questions that may arise. So, Councillor Kaufman, I'm not sure the format of how you'd like to proceed. I certainly don't intend to read the request for decision to you, nor do I have a formal slideshow presentation to share with you. So if I might, perhaps I'll just outline the reason that we're here today, maybe highlight for you a couple of key considerations, and then with your permission, open it up for questions and discussion.
That's perfect. Thank you.
So the purpose of today's discussion is to review from phase 1 of the KPMG recommendations, the recommendation that Human Resources evaluate the outsourcing the self-administration of employee benefits and the short-term disability, long-term disability coverages. When we received this recommendation, we took it back and did some work in terms of reviewing some of the assumptions and made by KPMG and the information that they were working from in coming to their recommendation, and determined that there was some key pieces of information that were missing in their deliberations to reach the recommendation that they did. There weren't any questions or commentary requested of the HR team to go back in history and look at the costs of our current plan, or to look at any potential savings that may have been achieved as a result of self-insurance. And so that information was never actually provided to KPMG, simply because it wasn't asked for, And quite honestly, we didn't realize that this was going to be a recommendation. Otherwise, I'm sure we could have proactively provided information to help make a more complete recommendation. The most significant piece, as highlighted in the request for decision, is around our long-term disability program. And I think it's important to just reflect for a minute on the history of how we got here with our long-term disability program, and it really emphasizes the importance of what was being considered at the time and what our experience has been to date. So what I'd like to highlight there is that back in 2002, when we were looking at making a change to our long-term disability, there was a requirement at that time that because we were contracted with an insurance carrier, we were looking at the costs for renewal of that insurance. And at that particular time, the premium rate that we were paying was 2.1% of payroll. And that at the time, don't quote me on this, Dean would have the exact number, but it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $650,000 to $750,000. When we looked at our LTD premiums in 2002 that were paid over the previous 6 years, the total of that amount was just about 2.3 million in premiums that we'd paid over 6 years. Our claims in LTD for that same period of time were $1 million, so less than half of what the premiums were. The reserves that were accumulated at that time with the insurance carrier were just about $2.4 million in reserves. And at the point of the renewal, we were looking at a 70 to 80% increase in the premiums. So that was up from 2.1% that we were already paying, a 70 to 80% increase on that. So the recommendation was made to council at the time that we look at self-insurance of LTD, and long and short of it is council approved that, and away we went. So just for context now, to fast forward to today's environment, our current long-term disability rate for 2021 is still 1% of payroll. So to say another way, had we gone with the external provider back in 2006, we would have been paying a rate higher than the 2.1% we were already paying. That rate would have been inflated from 2006 to 2021. And I have no idea what the rate we would be paying had we stayed with an insured carrier at that time, but rest assured it wouldn't be lower than 2.1%, which is more than double what we are paying today under self-insurance. So our conservative estimates are that over the last 10 years, and this seems to be playing out when we extrapolate this, is that we've been saving approximately $600,000 a year with our self-insured model, just on the LTD side. So I just highlight that as an example of why the decision was made, why administration came to council back in that 2002 to 2006 period and recommended this as an effective and efficient way to move forward. The last comment I would make regarding the recommendations is to suggest that while the recommendation to outsource or to look at outsourcing on its own may be incomplete based on the lack of data, there were some other recommendations that were included in this particular recommendation that will be considered and do need to be considered. And I just note them briefly in the bottom of the request for decision. So that includes the work that we're currently actively working on, which is looking at the segregation of duties within the Disability Management Employee Resource Center area and the rest of the Human Resources team. And also looking at the tax structure of payments or of premiums to see if there's a more efficient and effective way, both from the employer's perspective, but the employee's perspective as well. So those are pieces of work that we would intend to continue with and are here today to simply have the discussion and ask for the Standing Policy Committee's support in not investing any more time or effort in pursuing the outsourcing of these particular benefits.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Elliott. Appreciate that. Members of the committee, I'll open it to questions of Mr. Elliott. Councillor Carlson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mr. Elliott, for the explanation and information. I would agree with your facts, or at least the facts as presented make a strong case for continuing with the way we do things. How often would it be prudent to recheck these? If it's been since 2000, or I think in 1998, 2002, 2006, just going from the numbers I'm remembering off the top of my head, is there something that we should say that, every 5 years we do a quick check to ensure that we're still getting value for dollar on this?
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Great question. And the short answer is yes, it is something that should be checked regularly. And I would suggest to you that that is built into our procurement process today, in that we do go to market for our benefit service provider, our benefits consultant services every 5 years. And well, I shouldn't say 5 years, 4 years to 6 years, depending on how the contract is formulated. And when we do that, that is part of the consideration, is having that benefits consultant review our models and ensure that, when we look at going to market on these things, that we are getting competitive rates. So the last time that we did do a formal review of our program was, I believe it was 2018, when we renewed the contract with our current benefits consultant, who at the time was Morneau Chappelle, and now has transferred to Hub International, a company called Hub International. So if we continue to have that as part of our regular procurement process when we go out to market for this contract, then that check and balance will be built right in.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Crowson.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott, for this information. I know this is looking at it from a financial perspective, and that's what KPMG was designed to do. From a staff perspective, which gives better service to our clients, in this case, which is our staff?
Thank you, Councillor Crowson. It's a great question. I think some of the answer to that might be subjective. I would hope that based on the service that we've provided as an organization to our staff in the last 20 plus years under this model, has shown that we do, the employees do get a better service. And the reason that I would say anecdotally that that's more than likely the case is that we have a vested interest in this. When it comes to an employee who's off sick, for example, it's in our best interest as the organization to look after that individual and to ensure we've got strong return to work programs in place to get that person back to work in a healthy and safe way as soon as possible. When you're dealing with an external carrier, there are other motives that are in place, such as profit, that from a financial perspective, they need to make sure that they're paying attention to those things. That sometimes can result, and I'm not pointing fingers at any particular carrier, but that sometimes can result in a higher weighting than the actual service to the individual who might need a different level of care. So that's why we employ registered nurses on the team as well, so that we can ensure that, this isn't just some other unrelated profession that is supporting the individual through this. We have medical professionals on staff that are supporting folks through their experiences with respect to disability. So we would certainly argue that the better service is a service that we own and maintain and control and have a vested interest in ourselves, as opposed to a service we're looking to an external agency to provide for us.
Okay. So let's flip that now. Oh, let me put my mic back up. Let's flip that now. Let's say that we did look to an outside source to do this. What would that free up time for that your staff could be doing better that they're not doing now? So would there be an advantage to giving staff different things to do?
There certainly could be. In terms of pure numbers, and this is speculation because we haven't gone through that exercise, But in terms of pure numbers, we don't see there being an opportunity to greatly reduce current staff, for example, on the disability management side, because you would have different duties if you're working with external carriers, such as ensuring that you're working closely with them on each case file. Today, we manage those case files internally, and when they're external, we would still have to have somebody in place to be in contact with the carrier on a regular and consistent basis. So I'm not sure, to be honest, that a whole lot would change, but I suppose if there was capacity created in the system, that capacity would be repurposed back to things like looking for return to work opportunities, accommodation opportunities in the organization, which are always things that you never seem to have enough time to be able to do. But again, I can't imagine a scenario where we would say that an outsourcing scenario would allow us to reduce staff by 30%, 50%, any number like that. We're not a large staff to begin with, and outsourcing wouldn't free up a ton of capacity from a staff perspective.
Thank you for that perspective. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Morrow, did you have any questions?
No, all good. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Elliott, how many staff do you have?
On the disability management side, there would be 4 dedicated staff right now, and 2 staff that work partially in support of that system. The other thing I'll mention just with respect to staff is that while there is a tax burden from a cost perspective with respect to staff salaries, a portion of the salaries are offset by the premiums that we collect from employees in terms of supporting this self-insured plan as well. So some of these positions are funded through the disability plan itself, which of course the employer portion of that is still directly tax supported.
Okay, thank you. How is the plan itself protected? I don't know if this is maybe a question for finance as opposed to human resources, but how are we ensuring that contribution is all being protected?
So similar to an insurance company, we operate within that model, meaning that we are required by our own policies and procedures to collect premiums and build reserves, ensure that we've got oversight on the claims adjudication process. And like I said earlier, we do contract, we have benefit consultants and actuarial consultants. Right now, Hub International has that service contract. And our requirement is that independent third party review our systems, processes, and financials, and from an actuarial perspective to make sure that we're running a plan that is well funded, properly funded, and has the adequate reserves to pay claims. Now, there's no doubt that this model, a self-insured model, has all the risk associated to it attached to the employer, and that's why you have those oversight pieces in place to ensure that, as your claims experience changes, that your funding model might change, and potentially even your service model might end up changing. So that would be the first response there, Councillor Kaufman, in terms of that oversight piece. It's self-administered by the city, but we do have those actuarial oversights and those professional benefit consultant oversights that are built into the process.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carlson, I see you have your hand up. Is that again, or is that from before? That was from before. Oh, sorry.
Oops.
Okay, that was from before. Thank you. Have we, since 2000, thanks for that, Mr. Elliott, since 2006, or let's start at 2006, have we changed either the finance or the service models, to the best of your knowledge?
I'm sorry, Councillor Kaufman, you cut out for a second there.
Oh, sorry. Since 2006, have we changed either the finance or service models?
No, we have not.
Okay, thank you. You do talk about risk in here. Obviously, risks, self-insurance carries inherent risks. Risks are mitigated by proper plan structure management and fiscal management. I think I'm just going through a quick FOIP list here. Obviously not looking for specifics, but what, I don't know if you give me a real number or percentage of our workforce do we actually end up, generally dealing with on LTD or disability?
Dean, would you have a response to that?
Sure. So last year we started 319 disability claims. On any given day, we have about 20 to 25 people on LTD, just meaning that they've got to the 6-month point of their claim. And currently we have about 8 people that are permanently disabled from any occupation and will get paid until age 65. And so, given your question about reserves, all the reserves are set up to account for those different situations.
Thank you, Dean. I appreciate that. Do we have there's a critical mass to that? I'm assuming it's not set up to deal with everybody in the organization. So how is the reserve then monitored in terms of claims? I just need a little bit of understanding of that. Or, would we be able to carry 100 people on long-term disability, or I think by Jason's nod, I think he's starting to understand what I'm asking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll tackle the high-level response to that, Councillor Kaufman, and then Dean can jump in with greater detail. So everything to do with building of claims in our plan is experience-based. So as people move through the short-term disability process, there's reserve requirements that are built, when a claim is started there. When somebody transfers from a short-term disability file or claim to a long-term, some of those reserves transfer with them, and then you build more reserves on the long-term disability side. Obviously keeping in close contact on the medical side with an individual's prognosis and the likelihood of their return to work, those affect the reserving requirements as well. But that's essentially how it's done. So you're reserving at every level the amount of money that might be required to pay that claim based on a worst case scenario. And that wouldn't surprise you when you deal with actuaries. Everything is a worst case scenario. So, you're building these reserves. The good news, again, I'll just say with respect to a self-insured model, is that we build those reserves, but those are our reserves. We're not leaving those reserves behind with the insurance company when we close that claim and that individual comes back to work. In an insured model, those reserves stay with the insurance company. And that may or may not affect your premiums in future years, depending on what those reserves look like. All having that in-house, we get to manage that very carefully and very closely, and it remains our money, from the city's perspective, as opposed to profit for a service provider.
Okay, thank you. How much is in the reserve?
Well, that's a tough question because there's about 6 different reserves. But we're talking millions in terms of what's required from a claim basis to be able to ensure that those claims can be paid if they continue on.
Okay, thank you. Is the reserve targetable on a lawsuit if someone were to have a claim about something that the city did or didn't do in terms of its long-term or its disability plan? Is it targetable that way? I recognize insurance covers things for us, which is wonderful, but is it open to target?
I suspect it would be, but only to the limit of what the claim likely would have paid in the first place, which again, arguably would be reserved. So, so if there's $3 million in a reserve and somebody, wants to sue us for something, we actually have a legal reserve too, by the way. So, we would be able to access that to offset those things, but there would be limits on that, and we would be no different than if somebody went after an insurance company.
Okay, thank you. Not your first rodeo.
No.
Members of the committee, any additional questions for Mr. Elliott? All right. Hearing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Elliott. Thank you, Dean. I appreciate the information you provided and for advising the committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Carlson KPMG Human Resources recommendation number 2, evaluate outstanding the self-administration of employee benefits and STD/LTD coverage. Be it resolved that Governance Standing Policy Committee orientation receive this presentation's information. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. I'm just curious how to move forward with this. There wasn't really, there was a negative recommendation provided. Do we have to make a recommendation to council on this?
I think, Councillor Carlson, the way we've been proceeding as council is if there are recommendations that either council as a whole or certainly the CAO is bringing forward, council would make a recommendation to follow it. So while the recommendation has been made in the KPMG in the report, I don't believe that unless council instructs otherwise, that we're going down that road. I see the city manager's head has popped on my screen though, so he can probably provide a better answer.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I was just going to add that if this was passed to council for information, we would mark this as complete in our monthly reporting to this committee under the council work plan and the KPMG implementation plan, and see this as, again, one of those in the completed box.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. City Manager and Mr. Chair. That's what I need to hear, that this will close the loop with council as long as it's provided as information. So unless there's anything further, I'll call for the vote.
Any debate? Councillor Crowson?
Well, I'm here to vote.
Okay. Councillor Morrow?
No. Good.
Okay. Thank you. Is anybody opposed to the motion? Hearing none, that is carried. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next agenda item. Sorry, technology. 4.2, overview of organizational performance and continuous improvement. Mr. Dalton, are you introducing this or am I going straight to Mr. Van den Heuvel?
Just very quickly, if I could, Councillor Kaufman.
Absolutely.
So this, for the benefit of the committee, we wanted to come forward and provide an overview of OPCI, and why is because this is the response to a number of KPMG recommendations, to a number of the citywide recommendations, and I would say that this is probably, in my opinion, the citywide recommendations were the most important made by KPMG, and the opportunities they identified, the most important opportunities. And so I would just stress that this is not a shuffling the deck chairs exercise, OPCI. The work that's been done to date has been fantastic, and I'm confident that in the coming years, this small little office will drive the culture change or help advance the culture or evolve the culture internally, so that we don't have to rely on organizations like KPMG to come in once every 10 years or whenever that happens to be, but that we KPMG ourselves on a regular basis. And I think you'll see how we plan to get to that point as Tony walks through the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Carlson, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I saw a presentation package pop up on my screen. It wasn't in my package. Is that my failing, or can I get that somehow?
I don't know what package you saw here on your screen. Is it the one that's the organization performance continuous improvement one on the screen right now?
That's what I meant. Yes.
I have that in my package. Mr. Van den Heuvel, was this recently added?
No, this was should have been in your guys' package when the agenda was distributed.
I only have the summary sheet. That's very odd.
Mr. Westerson, is it possible to email this to Councillor Carlson at the moment?
Sending now. It'll be there in 2 moments, and we'll look into the issue with the system.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Van den Heuvel, you can start slowly until Councillor Carlson catches up.
Okay.
Speak very slowly.
I'll go slowly. Yeah, you betcha. Thank you to the Governance Special Committee for the opportunity just to share with you what the Office of Organizational Performance and Continuous Improvement has been doing in response, as again, in response to a lot of the KPMG recommendations. I'm going to share with you what we've done in the last number of months and just have a quick conversation about where it is that we're going. Next slide, please, Chloe. So we're going to talk a little bit about why we were established, what our purpose is, how we support the organization, and what our game plan is for the remainder of 2021. Next slide, please. Clearly, coming out of the KPMG Phase 1 operational review, there was a strong indication and recommendations there that the city lacked an integrated performance management framework with KPIs and associated accountabilities. And further in the report, it discussed the linking of performance towards our desired outcomes and objectives, the use of key performance indicators, accountability, and performance standards for the entire organization, as well as improving the information that business unit managers have for purposes of making decisions within their business units, but the information that gets rolled up to council as well that will result in better information opportunities for council. So that's why this office was established, and when the city manager arrived, it was very important to him to set this office up and get it going in the way that we have it set up for today. Next slide, please. So our goal then is implementing an integrated performance management framework across the organization. It can't be done off the side of somebody's desk, and that's why we took a strategic approach to setting this up so it had organizational reach. And if you look across the country, there are many municipalities, not only in Canada, but throughout the world, that adopt this type of approach to it as best practice. And I'll share some of those examples later in the presentation. Next slide, please. The office is established to become that center of excellence for strategy, implementation, reporting, continuous improvement, and as Craig indicated, lead the transformational initiatives for the city of Lethbridge. We're looking at making sure that we're aligned with the corporate strategic plan, which is a reflection and incorporates council strategic plan. Our goal is to minimize value, minimize waste, simplify our processes, and look at them not only from an efficiency standpoint, but from a customer service standpoint. Look for the direct linkage to costs and to make sure that the customer is at the front end of everything that we do, as well as measure and manage and report upon our performance and the performance of all the business units that are participating in this framework. Next slide, please. We could have waited and come up with the best mousetrap ever, but we strongly believe that continuous improvement is better than delayed perfection. As we were setting up the office, we were doing a number of different trials, and actually this quote came from our colleague, Jason Elliott, which really resonated, because as we're starting something new and we're going through the muck, it's that learning together in the muck that's going to really bring some highlights and some gems and some opportunities. So we're at a stage now where we're ready to roll it out, and you'll see where we have rolled it out and continued improvement. And then the organization becomes a learning organization, sharing observations, sharing opportunities, sharing resources across the corporation, all in the direction of continuous improvement. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. So three things any organization needs to know is they need to know what the vision is, where we're going, that North Star that's going to guide us as we go, how we're going to get there. And we have to have a plan to get there. And I think council experienced this very closely themselves last June when the city manager facilitated a session with city council in which they took the council strategic plan and said, okay, what do you really want to accomplish in the next 12 months? And that then developed and evolved into the council work plan, which is reported on monthly to council, and now is going to be coming to this governance committee to then be brought forward to council. And the other thing that we need to know is how we're doing along the way. And that's where the whole concept of measurement and management and accountability comes in. Next slide, please. So there's a clip of our corporate vision. So focusing on the strength of our people, we're going to challenge each other to be agile and innovative in a changing environment to help create a thriving community. And we have 4 pillars of excellence coming across: people excellence, performance excellence, customer service excellence, and partnership excellence. Today, we're focusing on the whole concept of performance excellence. Next slide. And so our commitments was to stand up and implement in 2021 a fully developed integrated performance management framework. Big words for saying a systematic approach that incorporates best practices in all areas so that all departments within the organization operate in a consistent and similar manner, and therefore we can realize efficiencies, better allocate resources, share our learnings, and better tell our story in support, and bring good information to council on an ongoing basis for council to make the decisions that will best serve our community. Next. So you take that concept of being agile and innovative, and you put it together with this performance management framework. We're intending to create this continuous improvement cycle to fulfill the mandate of performance excellence, all in support of helping create a thriving community. Next slide. So there's our roadmap, and this is what we've been sharing with the business unit managers that we've been doing the rollout. We started this process ourselves back in June. It was rolled out officially to the organization in December of last year when we launched with the corporate strategic plan and vision. We began immediately in the first weeks of January doing the orientations. All of this is designed to make sure that we are set up and have the ability, structure, and process in which a new council coming in this fall can come in, work with the clerk's office and the orientation, develop a new council strategic plan and identify the work plan that's going forward, and then all of us work together into 2022 going forward in this systemic manner. Next. So, organizational performance, you cannot just will it or wish it into being. It takes a lot of effort. So what we're doing in that orange gear wheel is really creating the framework and the structure in which this can happen. But the research shows us where the ideas for continuous improvement most often come from and are the most successful is by reaching out to those closest to frontline work. And that's why the two blue gear wheels is very, very important for us to make sure that our reach is into the organization right to the individual level, because oftentimes, more often than not, it is the individuals closest to the work that know what can be improved, know what can be enhanced, and have those ideas. So we're simply generating a framework in which their ideas can flow through, and then all of us together drive that goal of organizational performance right from the individual level. Next slide, please. So what does it mean for business unit managers? All business unit managers will have plans that align with the organizational vision and have work plans in addition to their business plans, which are more strategy. We'll make sure that we have those work plans, and then they work those work plans, right? And then they measure and report on those work plans. And then they are actively involved in supporting those that report to them to help create this culture of continuous improvement by listening for opportunities and exploring and bringing in different tools and methodologies in which we learn together, improve together, celebrate together, and continue to move forward in a cycle of ongoing continuous improvement. Next slide, please. The success of this program is dependent upon reaching people at all levels of the organization. So what does it mean for employees? It means that they too will have individual work plans, and most importantly, they will see the direct line of sight to why their work does impacts the organizational goals, the community goals, council's goals, and they can see that intrinsic value of work and coming in and saying that they're part of demonstrating and creating value for the community we live in. And we're going to always know the score. So it was Jack Stack in The Great Game of Business is a great example when they did this type of work in the farm implementation dealerships in the United States that were struggling. And they saw opportunities when they actually posted up in the walls of the factory. The performance, and it's the Hawthorne effect, when people know that you're watching, they're managing, the performance actually improves and changes. And the night shift would come in
is
and
now
see what the
exiting.
day shift did, and then they'd be motivated to continue moving forward. So all levels of organization, all employees will be active participants in the continuous improvement work, and also recognize what they contribute on a daily basis. Next. So best practice. In order to set this up, we have worked with governments across North America. We've also did some research from the country of New Zealand, for example, and how they, at a federal level, have implemented this work. We've had close connections with the province of New Brunswick and worked together with them and learned from their experience. We've shared experience with the city of Mississauga, who've received awards for the work that they've done in this area of continuous improvement. And we've built a relationship. And I can remember back in 2016 in a meeting in room 251 on the second floor there, seeing a webinar of the city of Denver and what they were able to accomplish by adopting and implementing a similar type framework. And I was struck then, and I remain struck today, when they talked about the value of their low-hanging fruit that they were able to move forward, and it turned into $6 million of efficiencies on their low-hanging fruit. So it was very motivating to see like communities, like municipalities that do this type of work on a daily basis. And they've been all very supportive of us as we've embarked on this journey. Again, the intention is really about evaluating how we're doing, look at how we can improve how we're doing, communicate it, and share the successes. We want to create an organization that council can be proud of, and we want to create an organization that our community can be proud of. Next. So there is an example of what the Denver Peak Academy has done. Their motto is to innovate, elevate, and repeat, changing the way government works to improve customers' experience, right? And coaches employees at all levels to improve that way. And it's remarkable, when we did some training with the city of Denver in December, they call it public service superhero training. And in the training there, it was a week-long worth of training, and they would bring forward individuals from their different departments to share some of their success stories for us that were participating in the story. And if you ever want to see switched on, engaged, passionate, committed people talk about what they saw, how they had the opportunity to improve it, what it translated to in efficiencies. When you think of wearing a team jersey, every single one of the presenters that they brought forward to share with us, you could, through the virtual learning experience, you could feel the pride of work, and it was very, very impressive. I've been in touch with the city of Denver as recently as yesterday. They share their resources, they share their experience, and so it continues to motivate us to believe that not only did KPMG present this opportunity, and when Craig arrived, he saw it as something that he wanted to do, but engaging the people that we work with on a daily basis, it really has high opportunity to create a culture in which everybody thrives and everybody succeeds. Next slide. So this is our framework, and it's basically 4 puzzle pieces all around strategy management, initiative management, process management, and daily management. And you'll see at the center of it, the most critical part there is our people. And that's where we connect very closely with Jason and his team and people and culture to make sure that we know that, you know, we can build the structures, we can build the systems, but it has to be built around supporting our people to be able to have success within these structures. And it's about giving them the right tools, support, education, development at all levels. So we maximize value, minimize waste, simplify those processes with the cost in mind, and improve our customer service. Yesterday in my phone call with the city of Denver, I was enthralled to hear their Peak Academy, and you can imagine Denver and the size of Denver compared to Lethbridge. Their Peak Academy is about the same size office as we currently have right now. And why they're successful is that they have set up their organization to be that support and center of excellence, but where the real work happens is by getting as many people in the organization throughout each of the departments bought into and participating within these frameworks, and that's where the success really comes. So the proof is in the pudding there by watching the models that we see in other municipalities across the world. Next slide. So again, we start about change here, and the change, and this is different, and this is a new approach to how we're doing things. So we're very conscious about how the people are responding and engaging this, and everybody individually and collectively experiences that change differently. Next slide. So what we've done is we've educated a number of people and trained the trainer programs through the systematic process of change management using the ADKAR model. And so in the absence of change management, you can take your current state and you can go through this bumpy transition, and then you can see on the bottom there, and you hope for a better future state, but there's a lot of holes in it because you didn't pay attention to how you're changing and the change management aspect of rolling this type out. Whereas the top, if we do this strategically, we assess our current state, we pay attention to the transition using the change management skills, and then we have a better future state, more closely aligned to what we envision when we begin our work. Next slide will just show you very quickly what the ADKAR model is, and everybody goes through this. Is they're aware of the change, then they build a desire for the change, and then they get to be knowledgeable in the change, and then they practice in the change, and they feel confident in their new abilities, and you reinforce it. So change management is a critical part of how we're rolling this out across the organization. Next slide, please. So phase one, from between January and June, we were rolling out to 24 business units, and you'll see in some reporting there, we're actually a little bit ahead of schedule. So I am working right now with the city manager as far as what our focus is going to be from April 1st to December 31st, and how we're going to be implementing this just a little bit faster than originally thought. Next. One of the key concepts here comes from a book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution, right? And all of us experience this whirlwind of overwhelmed and so much to do and all that type of good. And there seems to be societally this badge of busyness that everybody likes to wear, and it's this pride. Whereas the research from the Franklin Covey Institute has really shown that those successful organizations that take time to focus on what's wildly important, and they put their efforts and the resources towards what's wildly important, and they narrow their focus, they achieve much more than if we stay within that whirlwind of activity. And so part of this is helping people get out of the whirlwind of busyness and focusing on those things important. And it begins at the same type of process that council underwent themselves of saying, oh my God, we got 1 year left. We got so much to accomplish within our corporate strategy that we set out, which is all very good, valuable work for our community. And you narrowed down your focus to those things that you really wanted to focus on. And as a result, if you watch the reporting on the council work plan updates, you have seen progress all the way along since last summer. Next. So the framework is broken into the 4 puzzle pieces around the outside. It starts at the top with strategy management, which says where we're going to go and how we're going to get there and what's important to us. And it translates over into initiative management, where we basically go through and we dedicate a work plan, and we use project management bases to set up a work plan, allocate resources, define projects, set project charters, define milestones, even start about talking measurement and accountability. And the senior management team has gone through this exercise themselves, and we have a list of probably over 300 items that we're still negotiating with each other and collectively with council as to what our priorities are to help really bring that focus. And in those 2 areas, we're talking about what we're working on the business. The other 2 components of the framework are about standardized work and process management and daily management and accountability, where we talk about the systems and the processes and the tools in the standardized work, which we can train folks in and allow them to deploy within their departments. And this whole continuous improvement from the Deming cycle of plan, do, check, act, improve. And we can set these continuous improvement schedules so that you're going and going and going, always looking at improvement. But most importantly, there's a concept there in the accountability quadrant of personal accountability, team accountability, and accountability of reporting up and out with visual scoreboards, so that people are held accountable and they create a culture of accountability, which builds trust within the organization. And then the bottom 2 here, standardized work and continuous improvement, is where we really work in the business. So a very nicely balanced model between working on the business and in the business. Next. Each of these is broken out into a little bit more of what's included. So strategy management, options, strategy, why does it matter? What's effective? How do you communicate it? Next slide, please. Initiative management is taking that strategy and turning it into action, and assigning goals and hierarchy and priorities and building a work plan and working that work plan and reporting on that work plan. Next, please. Process management is how are we doing, and what tools do we have for continuous improvement? looking at our existing process to improve them, managing, measuring, and the process management framework that when we introduce this component or this module to the organization, we actually show them a checklist and saying if you're experiencing this in your organization or this in your department or this with your team, whatever, here are the tools that we can support and train you with that help bring those results that you're looking for. And then finally, the last piece is how do we do this on a cadence of accountability? And anybody that knows about changing habit, it's about changing the cadence, having a consistency, being accountable to each other and reporting out each other, not wanting to let each other down, but always driving forward. So this critical piece of daily management, it translates into some business units, some teams will have 10-minute huddles every morning to make sure they're on track. I know with our office, we start every Monday morning with a half-hour, very disciplined meeting of what did you say you were going to work on last year? Last week, sorry. How did that go? What supports do you need? What did you learn? And then they recommit to goals for the following week. So we build in that cadence of accountability so it stays on the forefront of everybody's thinking. Next slide, please. So this integrated performance management framework allows us to realize outcomes that are organized, intentional, data-driven, corporately supported, corporately aligned, and ingrained within our culture, versus what happens often in organizations are the results. They're still positive outcomes, but they could be inconsistent. They may be reactive, anecdotal, intuitive, or they're siloed within one particular department, right? When we present this particular slide in our rollout, I always use the example of going through the budget reduction initiative with council last fall in November and December, and really saying that, and it was very clear watching that process happen, that we have as an organization a real opportunity in front of us to shift to the right side of this slide. And the better information that we put in front of council on a monthly basis or a bi-weekly basis, the better opportunity council has to make really strong, good, well-informed decisions that serve our community well. And when you look at it from that lens, how we serve this up to council, it becomes very, very important, and it becomes real, and we see the opportunity example, and people were very engaged by looking at that type of example. So we recognize how we can do better in contributing to council's role and ability of making well-informed decisions for our community. Next slide, please. So this was provided for the agenda package back earlier in the month. And we just wanted to show you guys how we track some of our performance and what we were doing. So you'll see that was dated as March 5th. And we had rolled out the orientation to over 200 people in the organization. 225 people saw the strategy, which is an hour and a half, initiative an hour and a half. We had mapped 7 high-level process maps with 58 other sub-processes mapped in there. The next slide will show you how we did by department, so you can see the reach across the organization. Chloe, if you, sorry, my mistake. This slide shows you between March 5th and March 24th, how we've progressed. So this is a good example of we're watching and we're saying we wanted 24 business units done before the end of March. Well, we're well on track to having 24 business units done by the end of March. We intend to map, I don't know the exact number of processes, but we've got 84 processes mapped in the last 3 weeks and 9 top-level assessments. And the next 2 slides will show you again how this looks from a business unit perspective from March 5th to March 24th, all intended to give some reporting to council to have confidence that we are living this and working this. We're practicing what we preach. We're leading by example. We're committed to doing the same work that we're asking other people to do in the organization. And we see the progress from March 5th where we were at to the next slide, which shows March 24th. And as a result of following this integrated performance management framework, I've indicated that we actually were ahead of schedule of getting all the business units trained. Some are still out there, finance, for example, because finance is right in the middle of CIP. Fire and PSCC were held out because of the dispatch AHS interruption. But you'll see we've already picked up the solicitor's office at the bottom there. And now we're really going to be shifting our focus into the area of efficiencies. And so when Craig talked about early in the introduction there, we use a chicken and egg an example, right? So we can bring KPMG to come in and talk to us about what we're doing right or what we're doing wrong, what opportunities are out there, right? But we use this analogy that if an egg is cracked from the outside, life's over. You may as well cook breakfast and enjoy that last meal. But if an egg is cracked within the inside, life begins. And our approach to quote unquote KPMGing ourselves is to enable as many people in the organization with the tools, support, training, and opportunity to KPMG ourselves. And that's what I've seen the transformation in the other municipalities that we've been working with is once that light switch clicks and people buy in and accept the process, the results come way faster than if somebody else said, you have to do this. So it's very encouraging, very empowering, and we're looking forward to the remainder part of our journey in 2021, preparing so that the new council walks in, we do a strategy together, and this is just how we do work on a going forward basis. I think that concludes the end of the presentation. Am I correct, Chloe? Yeah, and if there's any questions the council has, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Van Hoel. That's an awful lot of information. Appreciate it. Mr. City Manager, did you want to speak?
Just if I could briefly, that is a lot of information, and but we thought it was important to share with this committee and to hopefully share with council out of this committee, because going back to those KPMG recommendations, and I think we've got 90 some underway right now. Again, the most important one around that performance management framework, or the most important one to me, is that performance management framework. And I'm convinced we could have stopped at recommendation 1. And if we'd have spent the time and effort that we've spent and committed to all those other KPMG recommendations into implementing and transforming our culture to operate and function day in, day out, like Tony's described, we would be even further ahead. The other thing I'd say is this is a lot of change. And I think Tony and his team, I view them as the staff of a Lada dealership living next door to a Ferrari dealership. They've got a tough job. And change is tough. And we're in the middle of a pandemic. And we're also implementing an organizational restructure and reducing the number of business units from 32 to 22 and removing 60 FTE from the organization. So it's a tough time to try and bring change forward. And change of this magnitude is difficult anyway, but we need to stick to it. And this is going to be a 2, 3, or 4 year journey. But again, if you look at some of those organizations that Tony's mentioned, and you look at Denver, and Denver's approach to this was a number of years ago, quite a number of years ago, was we could hire a chief innovation officer and bring somebody on board and really help us turn the city of Denver into a learning organization. And they took a deliberate approach and said, why don't we not hire one person, but turn all 11,000 of our employees into chief innovation officers? And so that's what we're attempting to do. And I would just say change is hard. There's lots of resistance out there. It's going to take a lot of time to go from that awareness to desire side that Tony's mentioned. But there are lots of good examples across this organization where that's already going on. So despite the fact that this is a long journey, it's a marathon, we're pretty excited about this, and it's certainly not going to be something this council witnesses in terms of outcomes. But going forward, I'm confident that we'll start to see 18 months, 2 years in, some real concrete examples of this paying off. And there's a couple that we can probably share quite closely already.
Okay, thank you very much. To members of the committee, Councillor Carlson, you had your hand up, then it went down.
I did. I think Mr. Dalton basically answered my question. Just further this, how are we going to brief, and I'll stress brief, council on this?
That's an incredibly good question that I'm going to turn over to the city manager.
Yeah, this is, we shared the briefing today and the level of detail that was shared. We obviously couldn't take that much time with council. I think sharing the presentation would be helpful as information. We could probably do a brief overview. Yeah, I'm not sure, because it is very much an in the weeds type of work. Yeah. But by the same token, as the board, and this committee is a section of the board, if I was on the board of an organization, this is fundamental stuff. This is, you know, to say transformative is not a stretch. And this is, I would say, in terms of working on the business, clearly our number one priority. So I think it's important the board be aware of it. The level of detail I would leave to the committee and you know, in terms of speaking for their colleagues on council. But I do think that that it's important that council be aware that this work is going on. And you may well hear, again, I you know, there's change is tough. And so you may well hear about or hear of resistance to this type of work. But I think it's important for council to know what we're trying to achieve through this, where we're trying to go. And it really is, to what Tony had said, you know, we should be KPMGing ourselves. And when Tony talks about engagement and empowerment, and the reality is, the more you put in the hands of folks, the autonomy, the more you give them a voice and a choice over how they show up to work, what they're able to influence, drive change, bring new ideas, the healthier an organization is as well, and the better customers get served. So I think the gist of this council should be aware of. And so maybe it's just a shorter overview.
And thank you for that, Mr. Dalton and Mr. Chair. If I might, perhaps Mr. Vanden Heuvel or Mr. Dalton, maybe just if a one-page briefing sheet could be created with the high points, that could be part of council's package, just so they're aware.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Don't forget that one of the nice things about moving to the SPC structure, of course, is that all of these meetings are recorded and they're put on the website. So members of council do actually have the opportunity at their own leisure to come back and watch this presentation. So perhaps in the one-page brief, or the link specifically to this agenda item could be offered to members of council as well. We've got the 4 committee members, and I see that Councillor Parker is present as an observer here as well. So at least 5 members of council have seen this, and it's just making sure that the rest of our colleagues understand what's being presented here as well.
That sounds perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crowson or Councillor Morrow? I see, Councillor Morrow, you've switched from phone to Teams, or from phone to something else?
Yes, thank you. I did, and I have nothing to ask at this moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Crowson?
No, I'm just glad to see where it's progressing and can't wait to see the end. This is a story where I'd like to flip to the last page, so I don't want to, you know, spend too much on the early chapters. I just want to see it when it's all done.
Okay, thank you. Before I get back to you, Councillor Carlson, sort of in the spirit of what's what Councillor Crowson just said in terms of getting there, what's the public going to see, Mr. Vanden Heuvel? What's the KPI, or what's the output here for the public?
So I think from a public perspective, and I talk often in the customer's customer, right? So we see council as serving the community that elected council, right? And so one, I think by following this process consistently, the quality of information coming in front of council in a systematic way, I'm looking forward to that. Secondly, I think city manager and myself had a couple of really good conversations this last month about the shift towards efficiency, right? You know, and I think we've seen with the KPMG operational review some ideas and some estimates. And now what we'd like to do, that we've oriented our business units going into, is let's start going in and mapping our systems. And let's start looking at our systems from, do we have the most efficient system possible? And capturing the efficiencies in that. So those efficiencies then get related back in future budget surpluses or whatnot, that then council has a purview for reallocation. But whenever I've done process mapping in the past, I not only look at it from a efficiency standpoint, but I believe you always put the customer at the front. And we're going to look for ways in which customer service can be a focus. And if the customers get better service, if the customers get a better information of what we are doing and how are you doing, and more and greater transparency. It builds to not only building the trust gap between administration and council, but it allows council to have reliable data in which is shared and be able to share out to the community. And so those are the things, when we get to the last page of the story here, those are the things that I'm thinking about, of saying, you know, how can we make it so that everyone has confidence and knowledge of what's going on, it's transparent, it's reportable, and there's faith that we're doing it in the most efficient, effective way manner.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dalton, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, it relates to the conversation that, and I can't remember when it occurred, but we had with council around service levels and staffing levels. And so when you have an organization, and when Tony talks about process mapping, when every business line in the organization can clearly look at a map on the wall and understand how they get from zero to delivering a service to the public, and when that process is as lean and as efficient as it can be, you can then tell that efficiency story. So that generates and builds confidence. So it's how you manage your business and being able to tell your story and demonstrate, because the public sector will always be the target of lazy thinking. From now until the end of time, it's just public service equals wasteful, lazy bureaucrats, blah, 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 blah. And in 98% of the case, that's not the case. And I should apologize for that language, but there's a lot of that out there. We have a brand to protect, I believe, and project, just like any other business operation. But the onus is on us. We need to be able to show our customers, who are citizens, that we take very seriously where every dollar is spent, and that we are constantly looking at ways to improve and be as efficient as possible. And Tony says, well, you can't will that. You can't wave a wand and make that happen. You've got to provide the processes and the tools to folks to do that. So one of the outcomes to citizens is going to be, I hope, is confidence in how we manage and do our business. And we report on that by having clearly identified KPIs and reporting against those on a regular basis. So that's part of this. The other benefit to citizens is progress and telling and sharing success stories. So if you look at any other level of government that has taken this cultural leap, they'll be able to bring forward and on a regular basis celebrate examples where, by applying these tools and taking this approach to doing their business, they can demonstrate either savings to citizens or enhance customer service with the same resources. So I said we're close on a couple of really good projects that we should be celebrating. And there's a big one around procurement that's underway. And when council sees, and the public sees, I believe, the success that we can achieve by applying some of these continuous improvement tools and delivering better service more efficiently, then that again is going to increase confidence in the public service here in the city and what we provide. So a lot of it is just going to be celebrating and telling these stories on a regular basis. There are some organizations that actually, and this is bold, and I think we have to be conscious about at what point we would do this, because I'd like to jump to the last chapter too, but this really is a 2, 3, 4-year journey. But some organizations actually fund teams like Tony's out of savings, and they commit to savings at the outset and say, we're going to find a 2% savings annually every year. Now that depends on the size of the organization, the type of service, but this is really, it is about doing business differently.
Okay, thank you. And then perhaps on that, just to follow up, we talk about waving the wand. This will actually be for you, Mr. Dalton, if it's okay. I had a number of quotes actually in the presentation, and I'm going to give one here as well. Culture eats strategy for lunch. And as you know, Mr. Dalton, we hired you for your many talents and skills, definitely, but also as an agent of change management. So how are we changing the diet of the culture, a culture that's been not necessarily in stasis, but has been relatively the same for some time here, to move to something that is this bold, is this exciting, is can and will take us to that great last page before we hit the next volume and start again?
Yeah, and that's it's a difficult question in the sense that as somebody still relatively new to the organization, it's difficult to define or describe the culture. I would say that cultures in most public service entities share a lot of common denominators. And one of those denominators is good people who are committed to serving their community. And so we've got that. My view of that culture piece, and I believe entirely in that culture eat strategy for lunch notion, is that occurs at the individual and team level. And so while we're rolling out this change led by OPCI, Jason Elliott and his team and a broader group of folks from across the corporation are rolling out, and you'll see and hopefully hear about in the next sort of 90 days, some significant changes to how we focus on people. And part of that is enabling us to focus on organizational health and culture, and really focus on team health and team culture. And these two notions of performance excellence and people excellence go hand in hand, because when you give people a voice and a choice through these processes and tools that OPCI is rolling out, the evidence and data shows that people are healthier. We all want autonomy. We all want a voice and choice. People perform better. At the same time, when you give them a voice in terms of describing what their culture is like, what barriers exist at the individual and team level to them being at their best, and then you provide them an opportunity and you support them in addressing those barriers, you start to build momentum. And so performance excellence and people excellence work hand in hand, and the culture gets better or improves and gets stronger as the focus and emphasis on continuous improvement, and Tony used the word winning and achieving, gets better. So they go forward hand in hand. I would again say that one of my concerns right now is, if you were to ask and survey those folks that Tony indicated him and his team have talked to, you'd probably get a very different perspective of what this is about. This is about, it could be, you'll probably hear folks say that, oh, this is just more change. It's the latest fad. We're busy. We're in the middle of a pandemic. When am I going to do this stuff when I do my day job? This is difficult work, and change is difficult. And I think from a culture perspective, change takes even longer. And so again, this is a 2, 3, 4-year journey to hit a tipping point where we've got more folks keen, invested, and looking to operate and function this way as not.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Vanden Heuvel, did you have a quick point to add to that?
I did have a quick point to add to that, because I think culture is the most important part of this aspect. And culture starts at the top of the organization. And believe it or not, council has a role in how that reflects throughout the organization. So a few years back with Greatness and Leadership, one of the speakers was Chester Elton, and he talked specifically about culture in his book, All In, where we're looking for engaged, enabled, and energized employees, right? That's an indicator of a strong culture. And you change culture by changing people's belief system. And the only way to change your belief system is to change their experience. So when we talk about this as a cultural driving initiative, we're changing the experience, and it's a positive experience and one of celebrating. And it's not, we don't trust you, don't like you, not doing well enough. It's about empowering, engaging, and energizing. And I can tell you, for the committee's entertainment purposes, as you are asking questions, my phone is blowing up from people that are on the team or in part of the organization, answering questions that council is asking us. To me, that's a strong indication that people are switched on, watching, and looking forward to what the next steps are. So it goes by individual, team, but I believe, as our city manager indicated, over the next number of years, this will be our new norm, and we will get that culture that I think all of us desire.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Carlson, did you have a question?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on the committee have a question? Seeing none. Councillor Parker, was there anything you wanted to ask? And I apologize for not recognizing you in the last presentation.
No, that's no problem at all. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. No, I would just wanted to see some of these presentations, and being an outsider, because usually you guys also watch our stuff, so I just wanted to see it from my perspective, and everything looks really good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there is nothing else, thank you, Mr. Vanden Heuvel, for your work, for the presentation. And as I say, we can share this link with our colleagues so they can actually catch up and watch it their own leisure and their own time. And thank you, Mr. Dalton, for your ongoing work as well to move this ahead. Thank you, Mr. Westerson, for putting that on the screen so I don't have to lift my glasses, at least I hope not. Moved by Councillor Morrow. overview of organizational performance and continuous improvement, item 4.2. Be it resolved that the Governance Standing Policy Committee orientation received this presentation as information. And I'm just wondering if we want to, and further be it resolved, a brief overview of the presentation be provided to all of council. Councillor Parker.
Mr. Chairman, the reason I usually don't want to get in on this, but I was trying to link in to the link to watch this as a viewer, like a citizen, and I couldn't link in. That's why I had to have the Teams invite. So can you just double check with the city clerk's department that people, like citizens, can click onto the agenda and watch it? Because I couldn't do it at that time. Maybe we can now, but I tried to come in earlier, so that's why I had to use the Teams link.
Okay, thank you. We unfortunately started late.
Oh, okay.
We came out of closed session a bit late, so we didn't get started until I think 1:36 or 1:37. So that's
okay. It could have been that then.
My fault as chair. Thank you.
No, it's all good. Thank you.
Yeah. To city council is probably fine. Okay, thank you. Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Councillor Kaufman. Yeah, as was stated, there's a lot of information, a lot of work has gone into this. I think we all know that this is the direction we want to take. That's why we hired the city manager previous and Mr. Dalton currently for these specific reasons. And I know that the community will, I think, be very well accepting of this. And I know that, council is definitely wanting to, as Councillor Croson said, we'd like to see, we'd like to be at the end of the very last page of this, and we totally understand it's a lengthy process, but I think I'm safe to say that what's put in front of us here today is very impressive. A lot of work's gone into it. We want to thank everybody that's been involved in putting this together, and I'm sure many of us are happy to go along on this path and be at the end when we will achieve the goals that we want to achieve. So if anybody has anything else to add, I'd appreciate that. If not, I will call for the question.
Thank you. Anything from Councillor Croson or Councillor Carlson? Okay, hearing nothing, and for as much as we'd all want to put in there and further be resolved that this be completed next week, I'm pretty sure that would not be possible, but again, thank you. And if I'm hearing, is there anybody in opposition to this motion? Hearing none, that is approved. That is passed. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Vanden Heuvel. Thank you to you and your team. I appreciate the work. Members of the committee, we've been meeting for about an hour and a half. Did you want a brief break, or do you want to power through this and then break before we return to closed session?
Mr. Chair, I can power through it. I think the next items are fairly brief.
Okay.
But that's just me.
Okay. And hearing nothing from the others, then we will continue through. Item 5.1. Sorry, folks, I'm slipping back and forth. A monthly council work up plan update. Mr. City Manager, do you have anything to report on that?
Sorry, Councillor Kaufman, I was trying to get my agenda back up, so I missed the question.
Sorry, that's okay. I just wondering if you had anything in terms of monthly council work plan update for March 2021.
No, nothing specific to pull out of that.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion from Councillor Carlson. Be it resolved, well, let me read the motion. Be it resolved that the Government Standing Policy Committee orientation receive the council work plan update March 2021 as information. Did any members of the committee have any questions on it?
So can you read that motion again?
Be it resolved that the Governance Standing Policy Committee orientation receive the council, orientation, yes.
Thank you.
I read what's put in front of me. Receive the council work plan update March 2021 as information. Do any members of the committee have any questions on it first?
Just a comment that I think orientation is in a couple of our other resolutions, so we might want to go back and just take that word out.
Yes, you're right. We'll just consider that a non-protunct then. I believe that's the term we used to use.
Noted.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Westerson. Councillor Carlson.
No, just appreciate the updates, and it looks like everything is on track. I think it was one of the yellow ones is still the airport, but I think that's well understood by members of the committee and our community that that's a bit behind the 8 ball with COVID. Thanks. Call for the vote.
Anybody opposed to the motion? Hearing none, that passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 5.2, monthly operational review implementation plan. Mr. City Manager, anything to be highlighted in there?
No, nothing specific.
Excellent, thank you. I have a motion from Councillor Crowson. Be it resolved that the Governance Standing Policy Committee receive the operational review implementation plan as information. Any questions on the plan?
Councillor Carlson has his hand back up.
Go up. Oh, there's his hand. Yes, Councillor Carlson, thank you.
Sorry, just briefly on that. In the background on that, and sorry, I'm trying to find, keep closing things. I believe it talked about, there were 5 factors it was reviewed on. I can't remember what they were called.
Actionable within a 12-month window.
Yep.
One-time savings. Oh.
Yep, that's the one. Thank you. And I've opened mine. Are we seeing any of those one-time or ongoing savings, City Manager?
We're in the, thanks, Councillor Carlson, and I'll ask Mr. Van der Hoel to weigh in if he wishes. We're in the process of trying to add financial information to the reporting. So there are some linked to the budget review exercise last fall that will be delivering efficiencies beginning this fiscal year. But I just looking at the list now, I'm resisting the urge to kind of go through it and try and highlight some. But what we will do for that work's ongoing now, we'll try and have that done for next month. One of the challenges with that is if you look at the implementation timelines for most of these recommendations, a good number of them are in the 12 to 18 to 24 month range, and the savings will be delivered, or the savings will roll out over that time frame. So what we're trying to work on is a way to inform council and say when savings will start to be realized by fiscal year, and when there are savings that will be ongoing, when will they reach sort of the maximum level of savings they're on description. All that to say, we're trying to come up with a way to report on that regularly. So more on that next month.
Thanks, Craig. I think Mr. Dalton, I appreciate that you're trying to do that. I can't imagine that's an easy task. So I appreciate that you're thinking about ways to report on it. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. A bunch of moving parts. Councillor Morrow just got kicked out, so he's trying to get back in. I don't know if he's coming back in on his device or if he's coming in by phone, but he might be there shortly in front of you, Mr. Westerson. Anything further on this particular item? Your hand is up from before, I'm assuming, Councillor Carlson?
Yes, sorry.
No problem, thank you. Councillor Crowson?
Thank you, Councillor Kaufman. I think we can see from the presentations and submissions we had today how much work is being done in various departments. And while I'm focused right now on 5.2, just an overall thank you to everyone for the work that's been done and a recognition of all the work that is ahead on all of these moving pieces. And so I just wanted to make sure that that recognition is out there, and I'll call the question.
Agreed. Thank you, Councillor Crowson.
Thank you, Councillor Crowson. Question has been called. Is anybody opposed? Okay, Councillor Morrow is back online with us as well. We just had the vote, Councillor Morrow, on 5.2.
Yes, I am back. Sorry, my screen just went black and I couldn't hear anything. So I logged out and logged back in. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Nope, not a problem. Thank you. 5.3, Mr. Westerson, 5.3 will probably come if there are any recommendations coming from closed session, correct? So we have nothing else to recommend at the moment.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Move to item 6 on committee reports, Advocacy Advisory Committee. I serve on that committee, as does Councillor Carlson now, which is wonderful news. I have to learn to mute Councillor Mark Carlson somehow. The committee actually will be meeting tomorrow. We have had the resignation of Councillor Miyashiro, as was announced to Council on Tuesday. So we are having a restructure. Councillor Carlson has very graciously volunteered to serve on the committee. The committee is going to take a slightly different tack considering where we are in the cycle, and we're going to look at doing some strategic preparation for the next council. So that's the verbal update I can provide at this time. If I'm missing anything, I am certainly open to being corrected on that at the moment. All right, hearing nothing, we do have a little bit of more work to finish in closed session. So I will thank all of the staff that have come and anybody from the public who is watching or has been in attendance today. And I will, at the moment, entertain a motion to return to closed session. Councillor Carlson, all those in favor? Any opposed? None. We are in closed session.
Thank you. I'll be out.
Just give us a moment here, Councillor, and we're going to kill the live stream.
Just take a 5 minutes.
Before Ryan runs away,